All right, my warrior steps up and swings his mace at the ogre. Ooh, that is 3 ones. That's a death blow. Instant kill. Doesn't matter how many hit points the ogre has left, it is dead. Are you sick of D20 system combat? You roll your D20 to hit. If you hit, you roll your damage die. Repeat. It can get a little predictable, right? Well, if you're in the mood for something different, allow me to introduce Flail, an old school fantasy brawler that spices up combat in some ways I am so down with. Now, Flail does use a D20 for a lot of the non-combat actions. However, when it comes to combat, this game is pretty different. You actually roll a total number of D6s equal to your weapon's 2-hit number. With standard weapons, this is going to be between 4 and 6 six-sided dice. The goal is to roll as many ones as possible. If you roll a single one, that is a minor hit and the enemy loses hit points equal to the weapon's damage value, which is just a fixed number. You don't roll for damage in this game. If you roll 2 ones, however, you get a major hit and then you get to double that weapon damage. If you roll 3 or more ones, that is the death blow, instant kill. If you roll no ones, then the attack fails. And if you roll 2 or more 6s without rolling any ones, that is a fumble and you get to choose between either applying D8 damage to an ally or marking usage on one of your carried items, which we'll talk about later. I love that there's just more variety in what can happen than hit, miss, or crit. In addition to that, there's this section here on poker dice, and every class has some opportunities for some fun effects when you roll this little fistful of D6s here. Certain things are triggered when you roll a pair. That's where 2 dice show the same number, or sometimes it's 2 pairs. When you roll a triplet, which is 3 dice with the same number. When you roll a poker, which is 4 dice that show the same number. And yes, they do have a full house, which is when you roll 2 of one thing and 3 of another. And then lastly, some effects are triggered when you roll a sequence, a series of consecutive numbers on the same roll. First of all, let me just say, it feels really good to roll a whole bunch of dice on an attack. To be able to roll 6 six-sided dice is just awesome. And then you also get this really neat system that makes for some high stakes rolls with the possibility for some wild effects and some really neat bonuses. But before we get too deep into all the fun poker dice possibilities, let's look at what actually comes in the box, because yes, this is a box set. It is published by Games Omnivorous, who has a reputation for some of the best production in the indie scene. You might recognize their name from this, which I reviewed 3 years ago on the channel. This is Mouse Ritter. It's a super cool box set. Flail is created by Andre Navois, and it is currently on BackerKit. You can go back it. There's just a couple weeks left in the campaign. The one we're going to be taking a look at here for this video is a beta version, kind of a prototype. And you can actually download a digital version of all of this on their BackerKit page for free. So yeah, if you like what you see here, go get yourself a free RPG. I'll put a link down in the description. So here's a brief look at what you get in the box. It's a lot of good stuff, and we're gonna start with the book, and then as the other items become relevant and mentioned in the book, we'll look at some of the other goodies as well. In the beginning here, you get a note from the author that gives you a feel for the game. This game does fit pretty neatly into the OSR space, or old school Renaissance space. However, it does some things that are very unique. He mentions some inspiration and similarities to games like Cairn, Knave, Black Hack, Mythic Bastionland. And then he says here, but for years I've been chasing something that still wasn't quite there yet. A game that stays lean and fast, easy to pick up, easy to run, yet still gives players enough depth and chance for customization that a bard or a wizard never feel the same. This game never quite showed up. So I built on the foundations of minimal prep, rules light, and one-page dungeons, adding just enough crunch and character depth to make each new party feel different, and every character its own thing. That resolve became the heart of this project. A playtester once shouted, "This thing is Mouse Ritter meets DCC." And yeah, I think that's fair. The chaos of DCC, the craziness of DCC, mixed with some of the really cool kind of fiddly little tactile board game elements of Mouse Ritter. I think it's great. So yeah, you'll definitely get a sense that classes are key here. I really like Knave 2E, but Knave is a classless system. Now there are benefits to that, but Andre Navois really wanted to lean into the classes in this one and make them feel unique and give you a lot of different things to play with depending on what class and what subclass you choose. You can see the table of contents right here. And then we get into this section on the philosophy of Flail. So there's a page here for players and a page for the GM. This is really similar to what the Knave book actually did. And then we get into the law of Flail. These are the basic rules. So in this game, you are going to be rolling a d20 when you want to do most things, especially outside of combat. You roll a d20 and you want to roll equal to or less than your ability score. Now, I know that rolling lower can sometimes throw people off. You want to roll lower. A 1 is the best roll, a 20 is the worst. But as someone who's been playing Dragonbane for a couple years now, I find I've totally gotten used to it, and it's a much more elegant system because it doesn't require any math. You have a 12 in strength, you know that you need to roll 12 or less on the d20, no math. Rolls like that in this game are called saves, and then you also have combat. And combat, again, you're rolling a number of d6s, and you want to try to get as many 1s as possible. Time in Flail is measured in rounds, turns, or watches, 10 seconds, 10 minutes, or 8 hours long. Movement is measured in zones. There's not any matter of feet or meters here. You're just near, distant, and far away. So this does simplify things. Currency is measured in coins. There's no gold, silver, platinum, etc. It's just coins. All right, let's get into character creation. And first of all, I absolutely adore this art here. And I do really appreciate that you can look up in the beginning of the book the credits, which have artist by page number. So this piece right here, for example, is by Vault Crawler. So yeah, I love that. And the art throughout this book is super high quality. Just has a really great old school black and white style that's pretty zany for the most part. So for character creation, you're actually going to be rolling 3d6 and dropping the lowest. Then you get a number between 2 and 12. You roll those in order from strength all the way down to luck, and you can then swap 2 attribute scores at will. So if you really wanted to play a wizard, but you have low intelligence, just swap your intelligence with your highest attribute and you're good to go. Hit points in this game do not change. And again, as someone who's been playing Dragonbane, I kind of appreciate this. It means that you don't really have to worry about scaling so much because things aren't going to swing that hard when players level up. Things are going to stay pretty deadly and pretty difficult, and I like that. But the box also does come with some character sheets. Now, these are really nice. These are on glossy cardboard, and it does also come with this great dry erase marker with a little eraser on it. So you can actually write on these character sheets, and then you also get these tokens here. So there are tokens for all the gear in the game. So yeah, mine are in various states of being punched out here, but you do get armor, two-handed weapons, melee weapons, range weapons, traveling and miscellaneous gear, exploration gear, and class-specific items. The green is set items, and then legendary weapons and unique items. And then lastly, you have these conditions. Conditions in this game actually go in an inventory slot. So if you take the drained condition, you actually put the drained square in one of your inventory slots. If all your inventory slots are full, well, you need to discard 1 item. This is similar to what Mouse Ritter did. I think it's similar to what Knave did as well. So yeah, I really like these tactile elements, and you're actually just kind of playing inventory Tetris here. It takes me back to the Diablo days. I'm not going to go through the whole character creation process, but you can read about it in the book. If we look at one of the classes here, let's look at the Bone Whisperer because it's just a really unique class. It tells you your weapon specialty, your main item, your armor, and your starting gear. And then you have 6 instant backstory options. You can either roll for these or just pick one, and they're all very unique, and they give a bonus of some kind as well. So for example, maybe you are, number 2 here, a human vampire entombed alive during the Great Purge, seeking revenge on those responsible. You may use Bat Form Gift, which is basically one of the druid abilities, except it's specific to bat here, which makes sense for a vampire. So that's awesome. Then you have specialty skills for each class, and then you also get a pre-generated character here, which is really nice. And by the way, you can print these. They're part of the PDF as well. So if you want a pre-gen, you can just print a whole bunch of them. Then the next couple pages feature class-specific features. In this case, we got dark spells, side effects, and undead puppets. But for the cleric, you actually have different religions and a table for God's wrath. The other classes are cutthroat, druid, tinkerer, warrior, and wizard. The other thing that is just genius here is the box comes with these player reference booklets for each class. So you get one for each class. They are a glossy little folio here that has all the rules from the book that the player will need for that class. So you don't have to dig through the book. If you want to, you as the GM can keep the book, and the player will really just need this little character folio, which has all the class information. It's also the same size as a character sheet, so you could just use this as a little folder to slip your character sheet inside and keep it nice. Since we've gone through almost everything in the box at this point, I'll just mention the only thing that I think I didn't show you yet is this Tomb of 1000 Gears adventure. This is a one-page adventure. It's got an awesome dungeon map and descriptions of each location. It's got some monsters and encounters on the back here, and then it's also got a little description along with some adventure hooks. So now that we've talked about the character classes, I do want to talk about inventory and gear, which is the next section in the book. Again, you're kind of playing inventory Tetris and using these grids. You also have to mark usage. So when you go into combat, if you use a weapon, you need to roll a d6, and on a 4 to 6, you need to mark a usage dot. In addition, if you take damage during combat, you need to actually roll. In the middle of combat, you do this. If you are hit, you can either take that damage or you can mark usage on your armor. There's other rules for usage on other items here. And then once you have the 3 dots filled in for any item, it is not able to be used and you need to get it repaired. The repair cost for an item is 20% of its cost. So for example, the battle axe here costs 40, which means if you want to get it repaired, if all 3 dots are filled up, it's gonna cost you 8 coins. If you are wearing heavy armor like plate mail, you're gonna have to pay 20% of 200. So that's gonna be 40 coins. So it can get pretty expensive, and it's a matter of making that decision. Do I wanna take the damage or do I wanna mark usage on my armor? There's also the matter of having to find someone who can repair the item, because if you're out in a dungeon, you can't necessarily just do that. And yet you will notice here that, for example, a helmet has 2 usage circles, whereas plate mail has 6. So there is a difference there as well. Here with the weapons, you can see the 2 hit. That's the number of d6s you will be rolling in an attack with that weapon. And then you can see the damage, which again, for a minor hit will just be the standard damage. For a major hit is going to be double this number. There's a whole lot of other gear listed in the book here, and then we get to the section on saves. So yes, we already talked about saves. You roll a d20 and try to get equal to or less than your attribute. And then there's also advantage and disadvantage, where you're rolling 2 d20s and taking the lowest or the highest. There's a section on opposed saves here, and then there are also some unique consequences for failing. It's not necessarily just that you can't do what you wanted to do. So I appreciate that. Again, adding a little bit more variety into the game and not making it simple hit or not hit. Now we already talked about the basics of combat, but I do want to mention some of those really fun effects and abilities that get triggered when you roll the poker dice. So some examples of pair effects. When Bone Whispers slay a non-undead target themselves in a 2-hit roll, they restore spirit equal to the target's remaining hit points. If 2 pairs are rolled, they may summon their undead puppet. When Cutthroats roll 2 pairs on a 2-hit roll, they can make a new attack immediately. If Wizards roll a pair while spellcasting, they recover mana of the same value of the pair. So if you roll a pair of 3s, you can recoup 3 mana. Now let's talk about triplets, and actually monsters have some of this stuff too. With an Earth Elemental, on a hit on any triplet, the target must make a save or take an extra d4 damage. The Ogre has a Goblin throwing ability, and on a triplet, the Goblin hits the target with a knife for an additional d6 damage. If Bards make a successful 2-hit roll and also roll a triplet, they deal an extra d6 of damage as well, and their allies gain +1 to hit buff in the next round of combat. There are fewer examples of these things for poker, but there are a bunch for Full House, and one I just gotta share is for the Cleric. If a Cleric rolls a Full House in a 2-hit roll, regardless of hitting the adversary, their god appears, bestowing divine assistance. You can choose one of these effects. So yeah, there's just some really fun stuff here. I love how it adds just this element of excitement to combat. You're not only worried about hitting and the possibility that you can get a major hit or an instant kill, but you're also hoping that maybe I'll roll some triplets, or maybe I'll roll a full house, and then some of these other fun things will happen. They're not going to be super common, but the possibility that you could do some of these things is part of the fun. And if they were too common, then they wouldn't be that special anymore. Now, for character death, if a character loses all their hit points or receives a 4th injured condition, they must roll a d8 on the death table. And you can see here that only an 8 means your character is actually dead. But there are some other pretty nasty effects as well. Now for this video, I really just wanted to focus on the really cool combat system, but there is a whole lot more in this book that I'm not going to cover in this video. There's rules for hirelings, campaigning, then there's tons of GM resources, including hex crawl rules and some sample hex crawls, tips for creating locations, campaigns, along with some sample campaigns or locations, all kinds of monsters in the bestiary, and just a whole lot more stuff. Tons and tons of GM resources all the way to page 124. So again, go get that PDF on their backer kit page if you want to see the rest. But for us here today, that's going to do it for our look at the rulebook. So personally for me, I am currently running a Dragonbane campaign. I am loving that game, and I do plan to play that for the foreseeable future as my main RPG of choice. But man, I have got to find a way to work this in. Maybe some one-shots, maybe a mini campaign. It just seems like so much fun, just the right amount of crazy. It's got those OSR vibes that are kind of lean and mean and keeps true to these, old school principles. And yet it adds some really new and innovative things as well. So I recommend you check it out. If you want to learn more about my current game of choice, Dragonbane, I'll put a link to that video here on the screen. You can check that out. All right, take care, everybody. You'll see me again very soon.